Listen Lanarkshire is a community radio station governed by the registered charity Getting Better Together Limited. Therefore, the radio station itself retains political neutrality, and any political views or comments aired as part of political discussion programming or otherwise are not the views of Listen Lanarkshire, nor of Getting Better Together Limited. The station has a set of key commitments found on the Ofcom website, and we adhere to all necessary Ofcom rules. For more information or inquiries, please contact us at radio@shotshealthyliving.com.
Welcome back to What's the Point, the podcast where we cut through the noise and make local politics sound a bit sensible. I'm your host, Greg Lennon, broadcasting from the heart of North Lanarkshire in the sunny Shotts area this evening, where the sun is split in the sky and where the real conversations begin. Tonight we're digging deep into two stories that say a lot about where Scotland is heading. First up, we'll be discussing the bedroom tax. Yes, you heard that right. Despite bold claims of defending Scotland for Westminster's worst policies, North Lanarkshire Council is still being subsidised to a tune of £5.9 million to cover the cost. So are we actually fighting the tax or just quietly accepting it? Then we're shifting from budgets to banners. Many at home would have seen that the Saltire is currently being flown absolutely everywhere. There's a residential street these days. And are these residential streets actually hosting a more sinister message, or is the Saltire being flown out of national pride? We want to hear your views and your comments on that this evening. And in addition to that, we'll also be unpacking two fantastic guests as always. My co-host, Councillor Gerry Brennan, the Belsey Hill bowler himself. Gerry, how are you?
Very well, Greg, and as always it's an extraordinary pleasure to be here.
Just for the good folk at home, they'll remember that Gerry is the most fashionable man in the whole of North Lanarkshire, and he actually took Jesus' sandals and socks and paired them together. So, Gerry, it's good to have you.
Thank you, Greg.
Gerry, as always, we're joined by our next distinguished guest. I'll not even read out what I was going to say there.
No,
but anyway,
please do.
It's our old, good old pal, David Crichton, the Mr. Magoo of Motherwell. How are we, David?
I'm very well this evening, thank you. Nice to see, by popular demand, I'm back in the chair.
Well, there we go. So basically tonight then we'll be stirring a pot, drop some truth bombs where that's required, and we'll be reminding why local politics is even more entertaining, dangerous than Westminster and Holyrood. So we'll be talking quite a lot about North Lanarkshire tonight as well. So with Reform UK rising in polls, some say they could finish off the Tories and Labour in North Lanarkshire altogether. We want to hear your views, so please feel free to start calling us in for 8 o'clock tonight. We're live and taking your points on board, and the telephone number is 07379 399 228. That number again is 07379 399 228, or you can get in contact with us via Facebook at What's the Point North Lanarkshire Podcast, or via TikTok. Send us in your messages, we're happy to read them out on air. And if you've missed any of the podcasts, we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcast for. So don't just shout at your radio, shout at us. We're quite happy to take the abuse
Absolutely,
tonight, so there's
Greg.
no problem in that.
Yes.
So gentlemen, let's move on. You actually get away with quite a lot there, David Crichton.
I did indeed. I was
usually
expecting a lot worse.
Greg, you've brought him in early. The last time he was on the show, he complained endlessly about the lack of airtime.
Listeners,
He's so shallow. So shallow.
I would direct you to the dreadful behaviour that was displayed here last week when I sat for 19 minutes, not that I'm counting, but 19 minutes without being asked a question,
David, we
or asked to contribute.
There's two people that listen to this show weekly, so
yes.
let's not put them up. So anyway, let's move on, gentlemen. I want to get to a burning subject that I think it exists within North Lanarkshire. So earlier last week, we were in a housing committee, you and I, Gerry, where you had asked a pertinent question with regards to houses in North Lanarkshire, which led to a question on the bedroom tax.
The bedroom, the spare room subsidy.
Oh, the spare room
as it's
subsidy, is that
officially
what it's
known
called?
as, yes.
Okay,
yes.
so within that, the bedroom tax is still a prevalent issue in North Lanarkshire, because again, at that meeting we asked for a general figure how much North Lanarkshire Council has been subsidised annually, and unfortunately at that meeting we didn't get that figure, but later on it was followed up in an email for the head of service for housing,
very quickly,
who confirmed it's £5.9 million
£5.9 million
per year.
Yes.
So
what you need to take into account is that the bedroom tax, or the spare room subsidy, has actually been in place since 2013. So the amount of millions that have been ploughed into the Scottish Government and then sent forward to local authorities is quite phenomenal. And I would have thought that the very first thing that a new Labour administration would have done would have been to abandon that entire project.
It's an unfair taxation.
It's an incredibly unfair tax, and what it forces people to do in England, where it's not mitigated by local authorities, is if you happen to be an old man or woman living in a family home that's got a spare bedroom and you happen to be on benefit, then you're almost forced to take someone else in, a stranger off the street, to bring them into your household in order to offset the cost of having that spare room. How dare you?
David, what's your thoughts on the dreaded bedroom tax?
I think it's just another one of these things that you'd never expect really to see for Labour. You know, because they've targeted so many different people more recently. So you talk traditionally that, you know, the working man's party and all this kind of stuff, and for generations that's what they were. But now you're looking at people that are bedroom taxed, benefit capped, two-child benefit payments. You're looking at a raid on inheritance tax. Now, everybody's saying that's for the rich, but actually the way house prices and stuff are going is that many, many more, I'm going to say, normal people, and I mean that by what you wouldn't extend to being rich.
There you go. Right, so take this into account, the right to buy, and you're right, because we've now gone probably a generation and a half since the introduction of that in 1980. So, like, my parents bought the house not immediately in the 1980s. They ended up buying theirs in the 90s, and by the time, I think they paid something like £18,000 for it. And when my mother and father passed away, God rest them, the house was worth £125,000. So I mean, it just shows you how quickly that the value in that asset increased. Now, you don't know what people have in their pension, what they have in their savings, what they have elsewhere, but you could very quickly be over the threshold for inheritance tax
without realising.
and hammered.
So if you think about it, Labour come in and they promise a change, but that change over the past year for them being in government has been what change have we seen? The only change that I've seen is an increase in austerity for worse than what the Tories were doing under Cameron. So really, in effect, if we look at it, £5.9 million, and to bring it back into the context of the bedroom tax in North Lanarkshire, to North Lanarkshire Council per year to subsidise the bedroom tax and mitigate towards that cost coming to the authority and the individuals. You've got 32 local authorities in Scotland, and each one of the local authorities will be getting some level of subsidy in that, which is a significant part of the Scottish budget. So
you could probably do the sums, because we get around 7%. North Lanarkshire get around 7% of the entire allocation. So if 6 million is 7% of the overall national allocation, you can do the sums on that. But you're talking vast amounts of money to mitigate. I don't want to say wasted money, right? But if you were to look, see, for £6 million a year in the middle of a housing crisis, you could buy. I mean, we've spoken about this before, about the house price of an often like open market, an open market sale of an ex-local authority house. You can pick up a 2-bedroom flat in North Lanarkshire for about 90 grand. A 2-bedroom terrace property for about 125, and a semi-detached for about 150, right? So just average that out at about £150,000 per property, and that would include a wee bit of fat to ensure that property was brought up to standard, Scottish Housing Quality Standard. Every year we could build 40 new houses every single year with that. You scale that up over 10, 20 years. Where is the crisis? You've eradicated the housing crisis. There's still private building going on, there's still private developing going on, but you're developing your own social housing that generates income, that pays for itself in the long term, and is an asset that you can use to borrow for other means. So
the thing that surprises me in this as well is if you take the number of the 32 councils that are predominantly Labour controlled, it's a Labour UK government, majority of Labour MPs that were elected in Scotland are practically former councillors, and we come and hone back into North Lanarkshire, well again we've got 2 former councillors who are now sitting MPs. And what I can't understand is the question that I posed at that committee is the leader of the council in a position to write to his UK Prime Minister to ask him to do away with this unfair taxation policy? And right now the response has been quiet, zero, nothing to say that, do you know what, that's a good idea, we're going to go forward with that, because ultimately if we save the Scottish Government money per year, then that can be reinvested back into local authority.
I mean, keep the money coming. Labour, keep that $6 million coming. We won't waste it. No, we won't waste it on a project that's designed to punish people, because guess what we did through UK Westminster governments? We sold off their assets. We sold off gas, we sold off electricity, we sold off British Airways, British Coal, our council stock.
When you keep an idea of the deindustrialisation of this country, because when we come on to the subject matter we're coming on to next, that's where I want to focus the conversation and where the beginning of this started. However, David, if you take the Housing Committee $6 million per year, why do you think the leader of the council would be reluctant to write to his UK masters and ask them to take that unfair tax away, especially if he can garner support for the 32 other local authorities?
I know why immediately. He can't speak North Korean.
Kim Jong Jim.
I don't know what his language capabilities, but it's like, I mean, it goes back to this. On a wider aspect, there's 5.9 million. We've spoken, and you guys.
I think we stopped saying 5.9 because let's round it to the nearest value. It would be 6 million. That's we've got £6 million.
Okay, we'll talk £6 million.
£6 million.
That's fair enough. But the wider question is that this money and other monies come into the North Lanarkshire Council. The spend we have spoken about in North Lanarkshire Council and stuff that people never see the benefit from, and it'd be really quite interesting to see what that figure over a year actually coming in, being channelled to somewhere else. What benefit does it actually bring to the individual residents of North Lanarkshire? And I think we'd be absolutely horrified.
I just think if you've got £6 million there, then the budget cuts that are being brought forward year on year to try and balance the budget, then these decisions become less difficult, because ultimately you've got £6 million in additionality. If you remember back a few years ago when the Strathclyde Pension Fund monies came in, and when the Strathclyde Pension Fund money came in, we tried to mitigate in relation to that additionality that came to the council, but that was definitely shut down immediately because we were only going to fund community hubs, I think it was at that time.
We also, let's not forget, one of the first things that Big Rachel did when she came in was absolutely hammer employers, big employers, councils in particular.
Your national insurance contributions.
So the national insurance contributions, they said they wouldn't tax workers, but they effectively they are. It's a stealth tax. And for North Lanarkshire Council, that meant an immediate and recurring £11 million that comes out of our revenue budget year on year on year on year.
I mean, you talk about Rachel Reeves, but the bigger question is there that some of the decisions that she's putting in place is that, because it's not governments that run this country, it's hedge funds, it's private equity funds, it's where the
They're
money
funders.
it's where the money
They're
lies,
funders.
runs and makes the decisions behind the scene on all of this. And it doesn't matter whether it's Labour or Tory, whoever else. That's just basically how it is. But one indication that is not in Rachel Reeves's favour is that this week they come out and they tack gilt rates. Without getting technical again, that's basically the rate that the government have to pay for borrowing, or government borrowing rate, and that's increased significantly since she came in. And the other thing that's also not great is what they call corporate bonds or government bonds. Now that's again the government kind of raising money, but there has to be an interest from the investment market to want to buy these and buy into the whole thing. There isn't just now. So that tells you that the market is not in it's not a safe place, or they don't really think that these sees a safe pair of hands as it stands just now. And every time that happens, that will impact ultimately on the people, because she then has to continue to look at raising taxes, because she's not getting it from inward investment, she's not getting it for the corporate sector, so you're left with taxation.
This is the challenge, isn't it? Because it's her own red lines that she's having to stick to in regards to the budget. But when she's now talking about taxing or adding national insurance contribution onto private landlords, or she's talking about these different things and again squeezing the middle class more and more and more, because let's not kid on about it, the working class has got no more to give. So the issue here is, are we going to see a class division? Again, going back to the idea of a class war in the next couple of years, especially when the idea of immigration and all these other lovely things all come to an end.
So I think we're already seeing it just now. I mean, saw something on Facebook. It was a picture that was put up, and it was identifying this war that's being created by the right. Okay, and it's been amplified in the press, and it's been amplified in news and in the papers and all the rest of it. And we'll use asylum seekers, right, as an example, right? So the benefit bill for asylum seekers is around £60 million a year, which for each taxpayer is about £2.
Yep.
Whereas benefit fraud is £3 billion, and that comes in at around £100 per year per taxpayer. Tax avoidance, which is where the upper middle class and the upper class will frequent. It's £90 billion. It's £3,000 per year per taxpayer. So there's the class war right there, and the individuals who are bearing the brunt of this are the ones at the very bottom. And right now, it's asylum seekers who.
So we're going to come on to that point next, right? And I want to continue doing the idea of unfair taxation that comes from this Labour government, who ultimately promised change, but really in effect what we are seeing is austerity 2.0. That is what we're seeing. So where do they go from here? Because do you think people are starting to lose faith in relation to Labour? Again, polling in regards to the next general elections already putting reform at the top, and Nigel Farage becoming the next UK Prime Minister. And I don't know about you, but that's quite a worrying thought in relation to where we're heading as a country.
I think they've done themselves in. Anas Sarwar did himself in. Read my lips, no more austerity. Promises like, we will come in and save Grangemouth. And then immediately after he came in, and I watched this interview again last week. He was asked about 7 times why he made that promise when he was in opposition, or during the election campaign, that he could come in and save it. Only Labour could save that plant. And after Labour won the election and decided they weren't going to do anything, it was, they're a private company, there's nothing we can do. They're a private company, they're a private company. So people immediately look at that and say, snake oil salesman. Not that long after that, you've got Miliband saying that we promise you're going to have £300 less in your energy tax, and we're now 108. They've only been in since last May. Remember, the energy cap's going up.
Public energy company, any chance?
Well, no, but the energy cap's going up again. So since they came into power, it's gone up by £187. So if you look at the swing, right, there was no £300 £487 saved. We're actually £487 worse off
Again, the
than we would
mitigation
have been.
in that was the community energy company, where it was promised again that the community energy would come in and discount people's bills and bring down the price utility cost.
I want my energy cap money
Yeah.
that David Miliband and Anna Sarwar promised me. I want the £300 that they told me that they were going to cut, which they've not done, and I want the 187 that's been added onto the energy cap just last week on top of that as well. So £487 I want to see coming through my letterbox in a nice wee Gregory Peck.
David, so we've got a Labour leader that is reluctant to write to his UK bosses and ask them to take away this unfair tax and £6 million which could potentially go back into Scottish Government coffers to be put back to the public sector. Make sure our services are operating and running smoothly. What other areas do you think that Labour's failing in addressing, especially when we look at that government at present? Where is our El Presidente? Why would he not be pursuing such savings rather than blaming the Scottish Government for lack of funding?
Because that seems to be the argument that's ongoing, isn't it? I mean, I'm only there 3 years, and the argument between Labour and SNP just bounced back and forward like a tennis ball. So Westminster does this, Holyrood does that. They never actually tackle the issue that's in place.
Well, the funny thing for me is this was an open goal for the SNP. I don't know why the SNP have not jumped to all that subject matter, because my goodness.
I do. Anyway, David's talking.
No, you're fine.
He keeps interrupting you, David. He does it all the time.
Well, I mean, at least I'm getting to speak this week. Whether it's making any kind of sense.
Listen, his wee stats are out. He can't wait to come in with percentage figures.
No. He's got his book open here, and that always worries me. It means it's a quote, or there's some figures, or there's something about housing coming our way.
Or he's doodling.
So he's
There you go, PFI, but anyway, we'll not go there.
You've got PFI as well, haven't you? Because effectively, that at a local level, that costs tens of millions. And don't come in just now, Gerry, because I know you've got all the figures in your head. Don't come in just now. So you can't write. He's not in a position to write to Starmer and say, let's do this or let's do the next thing. But the other thing, now I'm going to go back because a wider issue, is that when you look at the funds that's coming from central government, whether that's UK or whether that's from Edinburgh ultimately that's there as well, is that, and it's not to be totally pessimistic, the system's broken. So you've now entered a situation where successive governments have allowed major corporations to take over the country. And I don't mean that to be dramatic, but when you think about the investment monies that's there, and I talked there about gilts and corporate bonds, I'm not going down that route, but it's like, but you look at who controls the pension funds that you get back when you retire. Where's that money invested? How does that then come back, and who controls that? The government have to invest the money to make sure that you get something like...
That's why you're auto-enrolled.
Well,
you're auto-enrolled in it to allow them to play the game with your money.
But auto-enrolment was just tickling at the edges. Auto-enrolment started at 1%, it's now 3%. Now that's still an employer cost, but that's got to increase. Absolutely certain Rachel Reeves, there we go, take it, mark the date, put it in there. Rachel Reeves will increase that employer mandatory auto-enrolment payment to at least 5 or 6% because she has no option. The demographics of the company dictate, the country dictate that has to happen, because there are so few people in a position, unfortunately, to be able to save for the future. So the demographic time bomb is already ticking.
So there's the cost of, so there's the employee cost of the wage, there's the additionality of the national insurance increase, and soon to come we expect a pensions increase.
Oh, definitely.
Well, all of which is to be borne by employers who employ working class people who generally spend all their tax, they spend all their money, because they spend more money proportionally than wealthy people do, because they need to.
Right, you mentioned there about offshore funds and people not paying tax and the corporates and everything else that's here. Can you imagine if the likes of BP or some other, and that's just an example, but any other major national corporation decided to start to reduce or withdraw their investment within the UK economy? That has a knock-on effect to everybody's pension, because the value of, in the marketplace of these large companies is massive. So they can't really afford to hack off these big companies. No. So the only option they've got left of them is nationally and locally to tax the individuals. It's like, again, but there comes a point where that has to stop.
Reform came out the other day there, or yesterday, saying about their plan for pensions. And within their plan for pensions, they want to take all the management of the pension pots so that they can reinvest back into infrastructure projects and housing and all these different things.
That's just an extension of Rachel Reeves. She's already trying to get major investors to invest only in the UK markets.
So what they're saying is they would like the opportunity to take everybody's pension pot and actually start to invest that in major sort of funds to try and generate the income to get us out the financial GDP mess. And to be honest with you, you're now talking about every local authority, because local authorities were used as an example in it, that they are the area and where they've got keen interest, because local authority pension pots are sitting significantly high, but the investment and where the investments are led to and put into, well, they're no yielding the return that they expect, should be something that's reasonable.
Are you suggesting for one awful minute that Nigel Farage is what's his name? James O'Brien calls him. He refuses to call him Farage. He calls him Farage. Are you trying to say that Nigel Farage is going to become the new Keynesian politician of our age?
Well, this is
It'll be huge investment of public funds in order to build the infrastructure that we need to survive. I mean, that's what the Americans done. That's what FDR did after the crash.
The New Deal was obviously one of the most successful projects of all time and created the middle class system in America. But the point that I would say in relation to this, and this is where it becomes dangerous in my opinion, we're taxing, austerity right now, and by the time Farage gets potentially in, then what's left after that position?
Correct.
That's the bit that concerns me most, because really in effect what you've done is take away from middle to low earning sort of families, and you left them practically in destitution by that point. And then again we start to talk about your energy cap prices and everything else, all that kind of additionality coming on and on and on, and just piles on.
I'm going to tell you what potentially could happen. We go back to pre-1947 and we go back to poor law, and you go back to workhouses, and you go back to the state not being the provider of last resort. You then rely on philanthropy, and you rely on the wealthy providing handouts, not being taxed, but philanthropy to save the poor. It comes back to the point, if you look at Musk in America and other people, we look at Tesla. Tesla's funded to the tune of so many billions of pounds per year. I mean, you're talking about benefit claimants. My God, Michelle moaning in relation to the PPI claims and the alleged sort of financial mismanagement that took place within that. You're looking at these things. These are the biggest benefit claimants there is if you're getting a contract to that value, surely, because we deliver in return. So really in effect, the idea in this country that your major party donors, your big billionaires, your news corporations, etc., and the tax that's on that level, I honestly thought that when Labour came in there would have been a fairer taxation system imposed on them. I didn't realise that the donation system has actually made sure that Labour will do as they're told and keep the status quo. But anyway, moving on for the bedroom tax. And again, final point on that is if a real Presidente is listening, Gerry, then I would like for a conversation in relation to him writing to his UK master to request it. And perhaps 1 week filling that chair.
Oh, listen, he's got an open chair. He's got an open invitation.
Your chair, an open invitation.
He's always got an open
I would even let him sit in my chair.
I think we need to be realistic that if he doesn't come on, I think we just need to get a cardboard cutout on Gerry and have that conversation, because I'm sure the answers will be riveting.
I would love that. Do you know, there's the only one thing I want to add, right? Yeah. I picked this up. I don't know if it was Richard Murphy. It might have been Richard Murphy when the GERS figures came out. And people need to think about this carefully, right? Scotland is in debt, right? So there's a notional debt that Scotland have acquired. So last year the notional debt was something like £26 billion, right? Now, I'm going to ask you both a question, right?
This homework.
And I want you to
David, do you know what this reminds me? Did you ever watch fantasy football? Did you ever watch it with Baddiel and Skinner? No. It's Stato.
So bits of it.
No, but people need to.
He comes here with some knowledge and he thinks, we'll fire some questions.
People need to think about this.
You're
right?
on a monologue now and we're moving on.
I'm going to be quick. Right? Are the Scottish Government allowed to run a deficit?
Are they?
Yes.
No.
How many local authorities are there in Scotland?
32.
Are any of those
You're on a
32?
roll.
Are any of those 32 local authorities allowed to produce an unbalanced budget or a
It's
deficit?
against the law.
Right. So if each of the local authorities run a balanced budget with no debt, they don't overspend.
Yep.
And the Scottish Government in Holyrood run a parliament that is a balanced budget.
No.
Where does the deficit come from?
Because there's an inherent deficit. You say that there's no debt, but North Lanarkshire is borrowing just now something like 892 million in debt.
Yeah.
Now that's funded just from.
So they have a treasury management programme that
let's go down that
clearly
route.
understands and mitigates for that. But they still produce a balanced budget. They don't spend more than they have. The Scottish Government don't spend.
Well, they do because they do short-term borrowing. They have to.
Very small amounts. Very small
Millions.
amounts. Very small amounts relative to the overall.
Relative to the
It's
overall
certainly
budget.
not £26 billion.
Anyway.
Where does the £26 billion come from?
Don't know, Gerry. Are you going to?
I don't know. I don't
honestly.
know. And that's the question.
every
If
local
if every strand of your governance in Scotland operates on a zero basis, where does the
But you're
notional
talking about
debt
they're trying to get back to almost like a global reset, and then we're really into the dark. The dark
Something to think
ages.
about.
So anyway, if you know where that 26 million comes from, answers on a postcard, we would be glad to hear exactly where you think that is. Right, gentlemen, moving on because we are running a wee bit behind. Recently, in social media especially, we've started to see the rise of streets putting up the St Andrew's flag in every lamppost.
Wild, isn't it?
And everybody is then posting saying, I've got my St Andrew's flag up and it's in my street and it's in my street and it's in my street. And the first time I seen it, I'll need to be honest, I thought, my goodness, there must be rekindling the 2014 referendum. And basically, if it's a case that we're looking to take things forward again, is it the possibility that nationalism's on the rise, etc. Is this where we're heading? But unfortunately, I later found out there seems to be a wee bit of a dark and sinister side to these flags being put up at the moment. And to be honest, it's quite concerning because ultimately, as in England at the moment, you would have seen yourselves, especially for the news coverage, that St George's crosses are being painted onto roundabouts and signage, etc., to show their disdain in relation to illegal immigration. Now, I find this rather concerning, if I'm being honest, because ultimately what we're seeing is this coming down to patriotism? Is that what we're looking at these flags to represent? Or is it a case that the representation of this is that Scotland's no longer a welcoming country? We wish to actually have no illegal immigration, no asylum seekers. Is it a case that as a country we're shifting into our English counterparts' perspective, especially with the rise of reform? And it's quite easy in relation to where you're getting your news from, and WhatsApps and Facebooks and Instagrams and all these things, where it's unfiltered and unfettered in relation to the news that's being presented. What's your thoughts on these flags?
I've got mixed thoughts, I'll be honest, because I've got family that stay in the South England as well, and we've had this conversation just very recently actually, and he's very uncomfortable with the whole thing, really uncomfortable. And he said, he drives to work 20 minutes. He said the number of flags, the paintings, the murals in the walls, the mini roundabouts. He said, now that's fine if it is actually about national patriotism. Yeah. Get that? If it's the Euros or the World Cup or whatever it happens to be. Flags go up, absolutely fine, no issue with that. But he said down there, particularly, he has got this feeling from speaking to lots of people is that there is a sinister background to it. And I think what you've got with these flags, and it's that you've got some people that may be flying them on the basis of patriotism, and I do genuinely think there'll be a number of people in that basis. But I think you've also got a level unfortunately behind that people are taking on Farage's message, if you don't want to call him Farage, and it coincides with a comment that he made coming in to say Glasgow is the UK asylum seekers capital of the UK.
Number one destination.
And then within 3 days or so of that, then all of a sudden we're starting to see our Saltires fly outside, and you start to think, okay, so is that in a response to what they're seeing down south? Is that a response to what Farage is trying to feed us?
Yeah.
And how accurate is what Farage actually saying? Does it stack up? So I think there's a couple of levels. I think there's a wee bit that some people, I noticed there was a group, I think it's I Believe in Scotland, independence group that's there out in Musselburgh over the weekend with Saltires flying over the M8. And I think that is more about an independence statement and nationalism and patriotism and stuff that's there. But, and Gerry's desperate to come in.
No, I'm not. There's a similar...
I do actually, honestly, unfortunately, think there's a sinister side to some of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been a group. I go out on the bike at the weekend, and there's a group that on the M8, on the western side, do the same thing. Yes. On the bridges, and they've done that every weekend since the pre-referendum and post-referendum. They've never stopped. But the flying of the Saltire was not as prominent until very, very recently, and sadly I think it does coincide with the Farage message that's going out. I think there's a groundswell among those who perceive themselves not to be doing particularly well economically, and as a result of that, there is always a kick down the way.
Well, it comes back to what you were talking about just earlier, is that people have been squeezed to the point that financially they are really in a situation that hurts. So all of a sudden when that happens and you start to you're maybe fed a reason for that happening to you,
even if it's not true.
Even if it's not true.
The question is, do people actually understand and can they articulate it's actually a government's failing? It isn't necessarily going to be the responsibility of asylum seekers, because they're the ones that's causing you to be on low benefits, to be getting sort of taxed a bedroom tax. Is it their fault?
But it's the emotive language. I'll go back to Farage as well. He uses phrases like legal and illegal immigration, when the actual phrase is regular or irregular. So you either come in on a regular basis, you seek a visa, residency or whatever else, and off you trot, or you come in unfortunately on an irregular basis.
There's no means to get asylum beyond the shores of the UK. There's been special circumstances set up for two particular groups, if I can remember correctly. One of them was the Afghanistan arrangement, and the other one was for Ukrainians. But beyond that, there is no legal route for an asylum seeker to seek asylum beyond the shores of the UK. So you need to be here if you're not from Afghanistan or Ukraine in order to make that application.
But there is no illegality.
No. But
and
what?
Jimmy Cllr was on the show. And Jimmy Cllr's a prominent human rights lawyer, and he highlighted the very same point. But the point that I would make is, and again I'm going to be a wee bit controversial here, given the UK's involvement in global politics and their involvement in many wars around the country and the displacement of many people. So we'll look at the war on terror in Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, etc. And then we'll look at where these illegal immigrants, and I use that word loosely, but immigrants are coming from.
Irregular.
Is it a case that the UK needs to kind of take responsibility in that action as well, because ultimately they were involved in displacement of many people and the country's becoming war-torn?
Do you know that is an absolutely valid point. I listen to LBC quite a bit, and there was a woman was on last week, can't remember who was on, Ben Kentish it might have been, and she was chatting away to him, and she was bemoaning the fact that these pesky French, we should just send them back to France, right? And the guy goes, well, we can't send them back to France. And she was kind of irate. Well, if they come from France, why can they not? The irony is that when we left the European Union in 2016, and many people who will vote for Farage and who would support that kind of mindset voted for us to leave the European Union. And when we did so, we walked away from the return policy that we had with France, and that's why we see these numbers increasing year on year.
Well, you're
year.
seeing numbers increasing, but when you look at the statistics, you look at the statistics and the actual numbers crossing. You're talking about 34,000 per year. We're not talking millions. We're talking thousands. And again, I'm sure you've got the statistics to back this up here. But the average size Scottish football stadium per year is what's coming and arriving in this country. Now, again, Glasgow, like you said there, David, was identified as the number one asylum sort of city in the country, and Glasgow City Council obviously has an onus in relation to housing these individuals. But the majority of these individuals have been housed in hotels. These hotels have been in existence for years. This isn't a new thing. These have been ongoing for, I could remember back to about 2012, 2011. Didn't hear many people coming forward at that time in relation to these people being held there. But the rise of social media and misinformation being presented in social media, that's the concern for me. And I think that people perhaps may be a wee bit hoodwinked in seeing, because, again, we came from a nationalist background. If you're seeing the Saltires fly, is it a case that you're looking at it as national pride? Or is there, again, coming back to it, something more sinister?
There's this continual decline, let's be fair. People are squeezed more now than they were 10 or 15 years ago. And I think that the natural behavioural trait is then to look and say, well, wait a minute, I'm out there working. I mean, we hear stories about nurses, for instance, working daft hours just to try and meet family kind of commitments and going to a food bank to have to feed their kids. And
working poor.
How the hell did that happen? So when you get people under that levels of stress that are out there trying their utmost to provide for family and to meet demands on them, when somebody starts feeding them an outlet as to a possible reason for that, then you become more receptive to it. Rightly or wrongly, become more receptive to it, because you're hurting. You're emotionally attached to it. That's there. But when you go back and you look at Farage worries me. I've got to be honest. Farage really worries me. He throws about these figures, you know, on the basis of fighting men or men of fighting age, and then he throws about this figures that this Glasgow was 50%, you know, more than any other UK city. Well, when you actually fact check that, it's still a high number. I think it was 38%.
Still number
higher.
one. It is. It's still coming in as number one.
It's still a high percentage that's there, but he bands these figures about in these so-called
40,000.
facts. But when you actually look at it, and for what it's worth, net migrations, I don't know whether Jamie Kerr covered this or not, but net migration also includes, I'm going to say members of my family who have moved from here to England and from England back to Scotland and stuff. So it's not just everybody coming from overseas into Scotland. But the figures just for you, 2019, we actually lost, in terms of net migration, 5,000 people. Then we were up 27, then we were up 22. In the last 2 years, over the last 2 years, it's been 55. That's been the highest figure over that period. So even by my counting, in the last 6 years, there's been less than 100,000 people in terms of net migration coming to Scotland.
I'm going to move a wee bit for reform, because I don't think this is necessarily, don't get me wrong, I think that the fuel to the fire has been added by that perspective, but you're seeing a rise in fringe right elements coming through on this as well, especially stoking up the sort of fear elements. Again, a number of stories that I've seen in the press, especially what were later proven to be inaccurate, is these males standing in parks taking photographs of your children, but yet Police Scotland come out and say this is fabricated. We've no incidents, we've got absolutely no arrests. It seems to me to be anything at all where that division can be further fuelled. And again, is that healthy in a productive society? Is that what we're looking for? Is that what we want our kids growing up in?
The reality is, they want your vote. Right. And if you find yourself in that, at the bottom rung of the ladder, right, in terms of economic placement and wages and all the rest of it, and bear in mind, following the 2008 crash, we have not met 2008 earning levels since then. So we're less well off than we were in 2008, and it doesn't look as if we're going to get to the parity with 2008 until about 2035. So that's how damaging that whole period was, and the period thereafter. If you are a new party and you're seeking to exploit a particular
demographic
within the constituents, then you will look for the softest target, and they are the softest target, and they are the ones that if you
underrepresented, less vocal,
less agency, less everything, and if you tell them that you've found a culprit, you've found an outlet, you're going to make things better.
Same tactical provision that was presented by the European Union and the Brexit
Very
vote.
same. But it
It's all
works,
Brussels and banana sizes
works.
and all the rest of this nonsense that was portrayed at that time.
It works.
Is there because I hate breaking it down into left and right. I don't like that. I think that again it's economic. I think it's positions of people becoming disengaged from mainstream politics. I think it's all these different other factors. Is it a case that these individuals, there isn't a response to that? Where does the response lie? Because you're seeing a prominent figure like Nigel Farage, and you're seeing all these other people who are taking to TikTok and social media and all these different other things to get a rally in Perth and do this and do that, and podcasters and all these different other things. Where's the response to that? I'm seeing nothing in relation to a response to it, really, because there's nobody as prominent or as vocal or anybody at all that's able to stand up and actually dispel the myth.
I think there's a natural apathy in the country. Not just for that, but if you look at voter representation and voter figures at any election, you look at local by-elections that are run that get 22% or 18% turnout.
Hopelessness.
So people are then looking and say, well, okay, the only people in their minds that can actually influence this are the politicians, are the government. They have to change the policy, they have to do this, that, the next thing. But if people don't have the trust in them in the first place, then the natural thing is to then look for individual groups.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting point that I would make on that. Keir Starmer, in relation to what he's been presenting over the last wee while now, his facts and figures are accurate. There's a reduction. Okay, granted that boat crossings are reduced.
Yep.
Same number of people still on the boats. So the number of people crossing is just more people on the boats. But it's statistics that's being presented to the people. There's no emotive element to it. There's no emotional background to it. It's not coming across. It's not hitting home. And again, the question then becomes, is Keir Starmer the man to actually address that?
He's a terrible
subject
communicator.
It's
He's a terrible
shocking.
communicator.
Absolutely shocking. Yeah. But who takes that mantle then? Because if people aren't listening to the actual facts and figures being presented by the UK government, then really in effect, does it suit the other mainstream political parties? Because again, it's a bit of leadership bashing. The SNP can ride through the middle. Labour will try and continue to dodge the elements of where they think that they're making breakthroughs, and the Tories, well, let's be honest, they're going to be obliterated.
Media play a huge role in this, let's be fair.
Yeah.
It's just exactly...
I said that to you the other day.
Exactly how it's shown to the general public. And there's still a generation, and I include my mother in this, sorry mum, but she believes what the BBC tell her. You know, she'll turn on the news and what she sees is what she thinks is actually what's happening. So there's a whole lot of information, misinformation, emotive language, emotive images, all sorts of stuff that's been fed to us. I mean, God forbid Trump talks about fake news and stuff, but there is that whole aspect to how we are being fed our information. And it comes down to, do people have the will and motivation to actually go and fact check some of this stuff? Do they have sufficient interest to go and garner the information?
All they need is one example.
Yes.
All you need is one example of a bad thing to happen, and everyone can immediately then say, well, we told you it could happen. And if it happened there, it can happen there,
but there's so many things. I mean, asylum seekers, I've heard it said, and I've been in meetings and I've heard it said, they come across here and they get given a credit card.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
They get given a card to spend 49 quid a week.
If you're lucky, it's £9.
It can be £9, 90 odds to £49, you're right. So there's a card there, and that's for basic essentials living.
Yeah.
So, okay, accommodation is made on that basis. In most cases, I think food is also provided in some of the centres or accommodation that's there.
That's what asylum.
But they have £49 a week. So this idea being portrayed you get some kind of gold credit card.
No, the big one this week has been not just that, but on top of this hugely lavish lifestyle that they have in PlayStations and all the rest of it, is that while you and you and me are waiting on an appointment for a GP. They have doctors who go to them on summons. The doctor, they don't need to wait. They just call the doctor, and the doctor goes to them.
So Farage isn't silly. He's no silly. He's been through this before
he's very,
in relation
very clever
to
guy,
the
very clever.
Brexit referendum and Cambridge Analytica and all these kind of lovely tech companies that were involved in analysing our thought processes, and where we lay blame squarely on the shoulders of everybody else apart from your government and power. But the reality of the situation here is again, is coming back to that idea of that Saltire. Again, 2014, when the referendum was taking place in the country, the Saltire meant a great deal to a lot of people, and it was about promoting that and taking it forward. We're now getting to a stage where we're seeing the Saltire being flown, and to be honest, I think there'll be a lot of people duped into that, because I don't really think a lot of people are understanding the meaning behind the Saltires being flagged at half-mast in streets, especially residential areas throughout the country.
I don't mind seeing the Saltire.
Absolutely not.
I think it's a beautiful flag. I'm always happy to see it flown. I don't like flag waving as a symbol of triumphalism or power, rather something that you're patriotic about or you're proud about.
It's
something
a motive,
that's positive rather than something that's oppressive
It's that
or negative.
great George Carlin saying flags are for the symbol-minded, and
Well, there you go.
it's a symbol, and I'll leave it for the symbol-minded.
Yeah.
So I don't
It
really
is a
tend to
motive.
disagree.
Flags across the world are a motive, of course they are. I mean, I don't know. How do you tackle that? I think you start to tackle it by challenging some of the so-called facts that you're fed, and whether they actually stack up or they don't stack up. I mean, bear in mind, Scotland's in a situation where they actually need migration to the country, because the demographic mix is such that our population overall has been static for decades. So I mean,
It's ageing.
well, I was just going to say,
It's ageing.
6 years ago it was 5.4 million, and in 2023 it was 5.44 million.
Yeah.
So
We stay away from moral issues on this show, so I'm not going to comment on that. But we've seen since the 60s and 70s population decreasing, because we have smaller families. And because we're so entranced by the market and having money and bigger houses and more things, it's not just simply enough for one parent to go out to work and another parent to be the homemaker. Both have to go out to work just to make ends meet. And there's less. We have less children, and we've generationally had less children coming through to oversee the baby boomers. So the baby boomers are all coming to that age where they're becoming a cost, and there's not enough young tax-paying individuals to cover that cost, and that's because we smaller families. Lots of different.
I don't know.
Lots of different. That's what's happening.
On a kind of family basis.
Well, within the phone-in section tonight, I would really like to hear from people who are especially considering voting reform. Are you believing the rhetoric that's coming out with regards to immigration? Do you believe that these statistical figures are far too much money being wasted on these individuals who are seeking asylum in this country, regardless of what method that they're seeking it? And in addition to that as well, have we forgot, my granda would always say to me, you forgot your old backside. Because if you think about it, Scotland's made up mostly immigrant families. So again, if you look at the people that came off the island, again, I'll use this example. Many of the men coming across in times of famine, they were young fighting age men, came over to set up their families, etc. And we all know how the Irish were treated in Scotland at that time. So are we seeing a recurrence of that? Is that what we're seeing?
We spoke about that last night. A friend of mine, Frank Devine, who posts regularly on social media, was drawing that very distinction between what happened in Scotland in the 20s and 30s and what's happening now. And
I think it's wider than that.
It's easy to see it though.
Yeah. Well, you can see the comparison for sure, but I think it's wider. I think you just need to look across the channel. You look at France, you look at Germany, you look at the situations that are out there in terms of the kind of rise of the far right, if you like, especially in France? And is it a case that, you know, the UK are only 2 or 3, 4 years behind that in terms of, you know, what the populists decide? Is there going to be a break point? Or does it just continue down that line?
But in the meantime, you're getting no real alternative to your mainstream political party. So again, they failed in governing, and I think the SNP, by the way, are onto a real shocker, because ultimately the Hamilton by-election must have told them, with regards to SNP supporters, that definitely voted for reform.
Yeah.
And again, as the SNP looking as if that element is on the rise, because if the SNP is not talking to its electorate and trying to work out and figure out where they've went wrong, I think the majority have got an opinion on where they went wrong. But again, if we're not having the same conversations in England, again, it just seems to me that the governance structure is getting away with it again, because it allows for these individuals to take advantage of the situation. And what happens at the end, say if Farage does get elected, his delivery on illegal migration, whatever that looks like, but again, his delivery on that, when it's not met, then all of a sudden we end up in a position where we're going to see something far harder, far scarier, far righter in relation to bringing something forward that not worth thinking about just now, in my opinion.
Yeah, it depends whether he a lot of people now think that he's going to be Prime Minister at some point in the future, but it's quite interesting. There's a lot of people also think that he'll only do it with the help of the Green Party, and there seems to be that bringing together of Farage and the Green Party. But one of the stats that actually I looked at is that just in the last 4.5 weeks in Scotland, people were asked, and it was an Ipsos poll, I think it was Ipsos poll that was there, how inclined were you to support reform? And how important was the message that you were receiving from reform? And 4.5 weeks or so ago, it was 4% people said it was important and that would swing their vote. This week, 21%. That's staggering. In 4.5 weeks.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, do you relate that to the flag incidents? Do you relate it to Farage being in, was it Glasgow? It wasn't Glasgow, it was in West Lothian, I think it was, making these emotive comments. To whether they're right, wrong or indifferent is up to people to evaluate for themselves. It's there, but I would just say check it.
My thing is the rise of this messaging on social media. I've noticed this. I've said to you too long time ago as well. I've got a family member that I use as a barometer, and the amount of stuff that they were getting sent in relation to immigrants and how much money they get and these hotels and this, that and the next thing. And you're looking, you're going, well, I would class that family member as a quite reasonable individual. They're no really that silly in regards to just being sent things. But now what we're seeing is the social circles, the friends groups, everything else, and it's just a constant bombardment. And if you're constantly getting that message, then it's got to be true somewhere. I take it the majority of these people will be thinking. But anyway, I don't really think we're going to get to the end of that, but I would really like, if there's any callers out there that wish to make their point on this, have a discussion, educate us perhaps. Maybe that's where it is. Then you can telephone 07379 399 228. That telephone number again is 07379 399 228. We would love to take your call. Right, gents, I'm going to stop just now for a wee break, and we'll get a couple of songs on, and then we'll come back hopefully with the callers again. But I want to keep on this idea of discussing where the populist right lies in the country and whether or not that's going to have a future. But we'll be back after these quick songs. We are now back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we had some interesting topical discussions there when we were off the air. However, one point that keeps coming up time and time again is who is going to be the response to the rise of reform? Does it rest with Jeremy Corbyn and your party? Again, is that where the response to this anti-immigration rhetoric lies? Or is it a case that the mainstream political parties need to unite and actually come out with facts and figures in an emotive fashion so that people can understand it? Or potentially, the worst case scenario, take a bit of ownership of the fact that maybe it's deindustrialisation that has actually led us to this position and back to Thatcher's government. But hey ho, I'm not here tonight to cover that topic. But as I said, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts. you can give us a wee call on, and if I had a bit of paper, that would be brilliant. 07 379 399 228. That number again is 07 379 399 228. So, I'm just going to ask the question. Are we a bunch of racists? Is that what it is?
Oh, do you know, I think it... I don't think so. Honestly, I genuinely don't think so. I think that when people are under duress and when they're under stress economically, they will look to find a scapegoat. That's just the nature of human beings, and it's always been that way. The question that you asked at the beginning about Jeremy Corbyn and your party,
yep.
I think that presents a really interesting departure from what currently exists. So you're looking at the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, who are about to be obliterated politically.
Yeah.
But you've seen the Labour Party desperate to be the party of England, who've effectively became the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
In order to get their votes. So they've abandoned the left, if you like. They've abandoned socialism. And you've also got Reform coming in, who are the ultra right side of that. In Northern Ireland, you've got its own particular brand of politics, and up in Scotland, you've got the SNP.
Yeah.
I think that the Corbyn aspect can pick up maybe 15 to 20%. I think you could be looking at Reform having 15 to 20%, and I think you could be looking at Corbyn's party having
all mainstream political parties.
It will really hurt Labour.
Yep.
And I think it really hurt the SNP.
Do you think they're going to be in a position like the Tories where Labour is done? Do you think that your party could potentially bring that position on Labour, or do they still have enough in the tank to see themselves through it? Because I do have a theory. I've got a theory after this government cycle that potentially they're done, because they've delivered nothing apart from austerity and sort of hit people in their pockets. But really, in effect, are we going to see a day where Labour is finished?
They're only done depending on what everybody else or somebody else delivers.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's no alternative delivery, then effectively you're going to be left with the status quo, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeremy Corbyn, he'll come with a profile, he'll come with support, and he'll come with people that absolutely hated what he did when he was in the Labour movement. So I think they've got UK-wise 800,000 people supposedly signed, 40,000 in Scotland, which isn't a huge number, but it's significant in the timescales that it's been done. That it's there. People looking for new things? Absolutely.
I think he was really clever in Scotland, and what he said, I'm not sure if he was in Scotland when he said it, but for disaffected individuals who might not necessarily like the SNP, but who are soft on nationalism and wouldn't mind Scotland being an independent country, they exist in the Labour Party too.
So just let's confirm exactly what he said. It would be for the Scottish people.
It would be for the Scottish people to decide whether or not they remained in the UK. And I think for many Labour voters or soft nationalists, that is enough to gather them.
So
that is enough to galvanise them. So I think that was a really clever political move by him, and it creates a road. An alternative.
It creates a divide.
It creates a divide, a road, and to a place where your party may well find itself in a really positive position. And it's a position that if the Labour Party had taken themselves in Scotland, I think politically they would have been far more successful, rather than saying we have no place for those who are soft on nationalism, who wouldn't mind seeing Scotland being independent. And it might have been a Labour Party.
Do you know,
that would have been the first party of government.
Go back to a prominent SNP councillor, and just at the point, I think we were obviously I think we were just at the start of this podcast, and they made a comment in the committee chamber, that populist politicians, I thought this was hilarious, but populist politicians just like them all there, it was the reference. Now if you think about it, our entire mantra is representing the communities in which we were elected to represent. We will stand up in that chamber if people ask us to and bring forward ideas and issues
like petitions,
Greg? Prevalent to them. If you look at your party has gave the same level of commitment. We're building for the community up and we're going to do these kind of things. And then the other aspect of this, whether we agree or we disagree, Reform's doing exactly the same. They're taking people's concerns, all right, in my opinion, they're going to put it the wrong way, but they're taking them and bringing them on a national platform. Is it a case that the mainstream political parties are just so complicit now that they don't even gather the ideas of the electorate anymore? They don't represent that anymore. They're quite happy to be in a chamber and that's their job.
Complicit on the basis that I think even if you put it in a corporate world, it's always difficult for a new start to get a foothold in any business part of the world. So all of a sudden you're looking at we know this locally, trying to get a new party off on the basis of progressive change in North Lanarkshire and standing up for what we think the people in North Lanarkshire actually want us to stand up for, and we'll continue to do that. But Corbyn's party, your party, is going to have exactly the same thing. They're going to have to get a foothold. They're going to then have to stand or put forward what it is that they're going to stand on. So you're getting wee snippets, you're getting things about, self-determination left to the Scottish people. That's fine. That will feed, actually, as you say, soft SNP or even within the Labour group that's there. But people will want to see, and it goes back to that earlier comment I made about apathy, is that people will want to see that there's something there to believe in. Yeah. Because without that, they want some kind of hope. They want to see that there's a chance of something that's different. And if they don't get that feeling, I think all you'll see is, again, in turnout voter numbers, is that it might not be significant. So they've got a real job.
Greg made he asked the question, is it the end for for the two-party system? Yeah. I feel like I don't think so, unless and this might require a miraculous intervention, but the first past the post system feeds the current system too well. It ensures that those who support and sponsor and fund the two big parties are rewarded for that, either through contractual arrangements or peerages and places in the House of Lords and all of that kind of thing. But if we move to a position where there's proportional representation, where perhaps you've got 20% Labour, Tory, however that's constructed, you've got 20% who are that far right element, you've got 20% who are the far left element. I think that lends itself to the UK adopting the same kind of political structures as you see elsewhere in Europe.
I was going to say it's the same structures in Europe. I mean, you look at how the proportional representation works in the major economies in Europe.
And it'll be coalitions that form the national government.
It's interesting, though, anybody that's listening, if you have 5 minutes that could be bothered going to the Electoral Commission website, and in there you can actually look at applications that have been made for new political parties. Yeah. And it's incredible the number of local groups, but all labelled as independents. And that's not Scottish independence. I mean independence, the basis that they just want to fight.
Party affiliation.
Correct. For local issues, to stand effectively for local people and away from the traditional party politics system that we've got just now. And I think people are genuinely tired of it, because what do they get from it? Yeah. Historically, not a lot.
I've got a couple of questions in on WhatsApp now. So somebody's wrote, we don't need more flags, we need more voices behind them. The Saltire can't fix your rent, your bills or your mental health, but your voice might. Let's stop hiding behind flags and start showing up. I can't disagree in relation to that.
Depends where showing up is.
Well, I think again, if it's a case that you wish to have political debate and discourse, well, there's proper channels for that. Do you need to fly a Saltire to show, or a demonstration outside an asylum hotel? Is that what we need to do to look for political discourse?
See, if we look back at...
Maybe that's a naive question for me.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is. And I think you've probably asked that question without you maybe done it subconsciously, right? One of the ways that you enact local engagement is through things like petitions.
Yeah.
Something that's important locally that's got a groundswell, right?
Yeah.
And that is a brilliant way to change policy on the ground where you live. But if it's quashed and squashed, and those who bring forward these petitions are ejected from your local authority, are ejected from your local chamber as they try to bring your representation through, then that is so it's so anti-democratic. It doesn't encourage people to become involved in politics. All it really means is there's no point in me signing that petition, whether it's 2,000 or 10,000 strong, because as soon as it goes in front of the administration, they're going to kill it.
Yeah, can't disagree with any of that, to be fair.
So again, we've got another couple of other questions. I'll just read them out quickly now. So we've got one here. Gregor, were you losing the Saltire to the same kind of politics that's turned the St George's flag into a symbol of division? I see it more and more, but I'm not sure what it means anymore. Well, again, I came at this when I started to see these posts that nationalism was having another swell, and basically the people were looking at that Scottish nationalism again as being maybe an alternative to the right. I'm called the right loosely. I don't really like the term, but as I say again, the rise of reform in the country, and is that really a symbol that there's hope? But it seems to be that this is becoming a symbol for anti-immigration, and I find that quite sad. I find it quite sad.
I said before, I think it's on two different levels. There'll be some people that genuinely fly a Saltire on the basis of national pride and patriotism and nothing more than that. And then there'll be others that are looking at the social media and the activities that are happening south of the border and saying, does that send a message? And if it is, let's send our message up here. So, very difficult to know. I mean, it is, if I stick up a flag tonight, you've no idea whether it's because I've got nationalist views or pride in the country, or whether I actually think, this thing with asylum seekers or whatever else that Farage is peddling is just no for me. You don't know the meaning behind the flag.
Look, listen, we've had reform candidate in here. We had Lambie. Ross Lambie.
Yes.
The credible, absolutely credible guy. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily classify Ross Lambie as a racist or any of these kind of things. I thought his stance in relation to a lot of things was okay. It goes contrary to what I believe in, but do you know what? It's his political opinion, and that was what he was standing for. Again, I don't see the correlation in regards to the anti-immigration sentiment to be promoted in such a fashion where that's now leading to protests outside asylum hotels. As I said, coming back to Glasgow, these hotels were in existence in 2011 and going back further. There was no mass demonstrations and protests, and really in effect, if you're looking at it, both on anti-immigration but also on the ones that are there that are anti-fascist groups, etc., standing to try and put forward their positioning. I mean, if you've came to this country fleeing any sort of violence, and I get the idea that it's branded as fighting age men, etc., and all this nonsense, but it's still a new country. And what kind of image is that sending to people in the world? That do you know what, you come here and
well, it's partly because of the words and language that you've used there, because all of a sudden they're very emotive languages.
Yeah.
You talk about racists and nationalists, and I can't remember the other reference that you used there, but I thought people will people will hang their hats on these words, and on both sides of it. So they are strong emotive words that's there, and certain people will use them for whatever means that they want to use them, the same way as they'll use the flag for whatever means that they think they've got a personal meaning behind it.
So when the podcast comes out as well, listen, we want to keep this debate going. As I said again, maybe as us, maybe we need to understand a bit more in relation to what people's thoughts and feelings are of this. Perhaps we're wrong in our opinions. I'm curious to keep a debate going, because the minute you shut the debate down, I think that's the bit where you put in danger.
Is it a bigger debate than the independence debate at the moment?
I think it is. I think it's rising.
I agree.
For sure.
I think it is.
You'll have an opinion, and rightly so, because effectively one of the I believe anyway, and you can correct me, Gerry, because you're keyed up in this kind of stuff, but Farage's basis or for immigration, other than but he's purporting a points-based system. That was one
Similar
of the
to
things that was put
Australia.
forward. So you've got Australia, you've got Germany, you've got
I remember an
America,
SNP councillor
Canada.
arguing the very same thing. A prominent SNP councillor within North Lanarkshire, I think he's the deputy leader now, who's always purported that the Australia model is the exact model that we need in the
Yeah,
UK.
but what I'm saying is that do we see Australia as being racist, if that's the word that you want to use? Do we perceive them as a nation as being...
Well, the treatment of the Aboriginal people, I think that's well documented, especially with the recent referendum results.
But in terms of immigration,
Again, immigration's
I
exactly.
mean, you could use the same with America with the Native Americans, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that if people are making an application to go into Australia, and they have a points-based system, and they have a means of delivering an immigration policy, do we from here perceive them as being racist in their approach? Or do we just accept the fact that actually that's what you need to do to get into Australia?
People honestly believe, I think, that humanity has always just lived in their wee pockets,
Yeah.
and they didn't move around. I was in New Zealand for Christmas visiting my brother and my sister-in-law and their kids, and I didn't know a great deal about the Maori, right? But when you look at where they come from, and it's the Polynesian sort of thing, and you look at the routes that they took, and you look at migration in Europe, we've always moved around. People have always moved around, and it's really it's with the rise of capitalism, I think it's become more pronounced that you've got groupings, and you've got cultural groups within that, and you've got economic groups within that too, and I think it's a dangerous recipe.
Just before we finish up, because again I'm more vigilant as well, we've got another message that's came through, and I'm just trying to, again I'm just going to read it as is, because
Is it from Nigel?
it's a wee bit of motive, I would say, especially considering the fact that we were talking about a wee bit earlier. Why is it always the poorest areas where we see the flags going up? Are folk proud or just desperate to be heard? Now, I don't know the specific areas that's gone up. Where I'm seeing it continuously happening is in Glasgow. I've seen it in Falkirk. I've seen it in a couple of areas, but so I don't necessarily say it would be the poorest areas.
North Lanarkshire is one of the. It's got some of the poorest areas in the entire country.
Yeah.
And there's lots and lots of flags going up in North Lanarkshire. So you just from that, you know yourself that it's going. I've not been to Mulgai. I've not been to Bearsden. I've not been up to St Andrews. I can't speak for
Milton to Posel and then going to Falkirk.
Yeah, maybe that is a valid point. Maybe. I mean, I had to really consider it, I'll be honest. It's whether it's, but maybe it goes back to a point we made earlier, when people are financially squeezed or in poverty or fuel poverty or going to food banks or anything else. Where else do you turn? What else do you do? Maybe your release is, actually, I'm hacked off at this. And one way of showing it.
Do you know, I always revert back. I remember reading a Dominic Cummins interview in relation to Cambridge Analytica at the time, when they did the research with regards to your Grimsby and that kind of thing, the people that were staying in the most deprived of circumstances, and they were the people that they were specifically targeting at that time in relation to the Brexit vote, blaming the European Union. The European Union's the reason, Brussels is the reason. It's just such the same for me that the learning has been taken for the Brexit referendum and they've been presented in this fashion.
It'd be interesting to see if it's the same locations that
is.
have the greatest swell of reforms.
It is, and it was someone from Reform who explained that to me.
Right.
That they look to see where the Union flag
Jacks are.
flies.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's where they go first.
Yeah, I remember that conversation.
Because that's the most fruitful.
They know they're supporting
ground.
their bases there, so they know they would be able to get some sort of.
And is that the poorer areas? Historically, or?
It's not always the wealthiest areas, but it's not necessarily the poorest areas.
But I also think that the religious aspect of things has got a lot to do with it as
without
well,
doubt.
and
Without
that's
doubt.
something that's heavily looked at. So Stonehouse, Lark Hall, that kind of thing. That was why Reform put a lot of emphasis on the areas, because they knew they could pick their vote up in that, and especially within the west of Scotland. I think they'll do well. But the interesting one is a Reform character was a Reform individual was named this week for transferring north, had been a Glasgow councillor, and I thought it was an interesting fact that the crucifix was being worn on the jumper at the time to show that I'm a Roman Catholic and I'm joining Reform. Now, considering the fact that, and this isn't any disrespect, but again, the Orange Order will be a prominent supporter of Reform UK, I imagine. And within that, how do they square the peg for voting for a Roman Catholic? Is Reform a party of all religions and none, or is it going to be a case that individuals like that ones?
That might just be a unique situation to the west of Scotland. Let's be
I don't
fair.
think so.
I don't think so.
Well, it'd be interesting to see, but it's like, I mean, I remember my family worked in Aberdeen and also in Angus and North East, and this whole religious aspect just doesn't exist
to the same, not to the same extent.
Edinburgh, you go through Edinburgh and it doesn't exist in the same context.
To me, that's much more localised than maybe what we see in a national picture.
I do think it's deliberate though.
Oh, but deliberate in terms of
the crucifix.
for that particular.
Oh, listen, it was a propaganda tool. There's no doubt about that. Absolutely.
We take 100%. Catholics too.
100%.
We'll take a Catholic vote as well.
Aye, who we do is a political grouping.
Reform. I mean,
we also take hedge fund managers as well. If there's any listening, by the way, just get in touch with www. Anyway, listen.
Did you mention Patreon this week?
Oh no, I never. I'll better mention it again. Patreon, apparently we have a Patreon account. You can go in there and get stuff newly available every week and bonus features, etc. I don't know how it works myself personally, but if you go to patreon.com and search What's the Point, you'll be able to get that information. In addition to that as well, if you've missed the show tonight or you want to go over and keep the debate going, then the podcast will be up for Thursday. We are genuinely interested to hear people's views on this subject matter, because the more debate and discourse that we have, then the greater the understanding that we can all
There's big elections coming up and they are right on our doorstep, these issues that we're talking about are going to be brought to bear
prominent issues,
very prominently, and it will be on TV, radio, newspapers, TikTok.
Well, David Crichton, thank you very much for joining us again. I'm glad that your wife let you out a wee bit later tonight, so
getting dark,
thanks
so
once you go
back
home.
down the road.
And Gerry Brennan, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Greg.
This has been What's the Point. Thanks very much for listening.
All the best.